The Last Word with Matt Cooper on Today FM.
It's time for our weekly medical spot with Dr. Ruairi Hanley, who of course also writes for the Irish Medical Journal. Before we talk to you about vaping, which is the topic for discussion today, there's something that's happened at an Oireachtas committee today we want to ask you about, because Danny Healy-Rae, the independent TD for Kerry, has been speaking about drink driving on a number of occasions, and today he took a slightly, well, maybe a turn to the left or to the right, or a turn in some way in relation to his debate on this. Let's hear him.
If you actually eat too much and get in behind the wheel of a car, you're a danger on the road, because you're liable to fall asleep after eating a big meal. I for one anyway, when I'm going home out of here this evening, when I know that I won't eat going in behind the wheel, because I know what to do. So there are many other override reasons and causes of the accident, as well as what you're saying, the consumption of a small amount of alcohol.
Okay, Dr. Ruairi Hanley, overeating as bad as the consumption of alcohol when it comes to falling asleep at the wheel?
No, to put it bluntly. I'm afraid he's basically wrong about this. And having said that, I have a certain amount of sympathy for Danny Healy-Rae, which is unexpected, really. And I'll tell you why. There is an issue of rural isolation and old farmers down the country whose entire lives revolve around once a week going to a pub and drinking 2 pints and trying to get home. And it's a different universe from South Dublin, where you can walk everywhere and go everywhere. And to be honest with you, I do not and never would condone drink driving. But I do understand where the Healy-Raes are coming from, in that they are representing their constituencies. They are representing the people who vote for them. And those people are lonely old fellas down the country. And somebody has to speak out for them, and something needs to be done to support those fellas. And I think there's a little bit of, patronising attitudes I've noticed in the media towards the Healy-Raes. Going back 20 years when Jackie was elected in 97, I remember Dublin 4 mocking then. It's still going on now.
Okay, but the issue of overeating, you said, is it that he maybe just would be tired because of the time of night that he would be driving back to Kerry, rather than actually having a full stomach? A full stomach does make a lot of people a bit drowsy, doesn't it?
It doesn't really impair you, Matt, I mean, the difference, alcohol is a drug that actually impairs your ability to do motor functions and so on. I'm not aware that eating a steak would do the same thing. I mean, I don't hear any evidence for that, to be quite blunt about it. So I think, look, he's barking up the wrong tree here, but I know he's going to be pilloried for this and absolutely slaughtered, but the truth of it is there is an issue here, in that I do feel a certain amount of sympathy for the old fellas. And I think when you look at what's going on with the whole road safety thing at the moment, the guys who are killing people out there by and large are the dangerous young aggressive male drivers who you see on the motorways up and down this country. I meet them every day. They're the killers. And the old farmers down in Kerry, I'm not sure they're quite the same league of danger. I'm not condoning drink driving, but we have to, I can see where the lads are coming from.
And then Shane Ross, the Minister for Transport, is talking about an absolutely zero tolerance approach towards alcohol, any alcohol at all, and you could be put off the road.
He's probably, you have to say, you can see his point, and there's evidence to support his position. But there's also evidence of social isolation for old farmers, and that's something that we can't just dismiss out of hand. I think the Healy-Raes, they get a lot of bad press, but in fairness they do represent people who are otherwise voiceless in Ireland.
Now let's talk about vaping, because you are one of the few doctors who has, I think, an open mind in relation to vaping. In fact, far from open mind, you think it might actually be a good thing as an alternative to smoking cigarettes. Tell us about this.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been saying this for about 4 years now, maybe even 5 years at this stage. The bottom line is, these vaping devices, the evidence is that they're 95% safer than ordinary cigarettes. 95% safer. So when you consider that 5,000 or 6,000 people a year are dying in this country of smoking-related illness, think of the enormous public health benefit that would follow if all of those people switched from ordinary cigarettes to these electronic products. So I think they have a role to play, and I also think they have a role to play in getting people off cigarettes, because there's good evidence to show that when people switch to vaping, they find it easier to quit. And there's no evidence to show that people are just taking it up who are non-smokers. So I think it's a very good thing, and it's a bit depressing, really, that so many Irish doctors are not really looking at this. We're a very conservative bunch by nature, and we tend to follow what we've been doing for years. But I think this is a really, really great breakthrough.
Okay, there's a number of things, though. There's a large argument has been, the likes of HIQA, the Health Information and Quality Authority, is concerned in the first place that non-smokers who vape will switch to tobacco cigarettes.
Well,
That it's a gateway they see to. I mean, people start on these e-cigarettes and then decide they're not getting enough of a hit, and they move to the nicotine.
I think it's more it goes the opposite direction. I haven't seen any evidence to support that statement. The Public Health England did a massive study on this, and if anything, they showed it going in the opposite direction, that people were actually moving from cigarettes to vaping and then quitting, which is what we want to see.
The HSE says there's a lack of long-term data on their safety.
Well, the HSE are saying that, yeah, and okay, we can accept that. But we know very much, we know beyond doubt the long-term data for ordinary cigarette smoking. It's 5,000 to 6,000 deaths a year. Now, these vaping devices certainly can't be any worse than that. If anything, it seems inevitable that even the HSE acknowledges that they are safer. The question is how much safer and if there may be other health consequences. But in the immediate to medium term, certainly they have an enormous role to play. And my view is that we should be actually hiking the taxes big time on ordinary cigarettes. If cigarettes cost, say, €20 a packet.
How will you drive the whole market underground then? Won't you have even more black market cigarette sales?
Well, no, if vaping costs a lot less than cigarettes. You're right about the black market, but that exists already. But if vaping costs a lot less than ordinary cigarettes, I think a lot of people would switch to vaping and the public health benefits would be enormous.
But what about the suggestion that we don't know what the long-term health implications of the vaping might be, that it might be a danger as well, that we're pushing people to a different sort of danger?
Well, it's by definition the product has got a lot less chemicals in it that cause diseases. I mean, that seems to be proven. Public Health England did look at this and they concluded 95% better. Now, look, no one's saying these things contain vitamin C. They're not good for you. The idea is, the best thing, of course, is to be off cigarettes altogether, and that's the aim that should be for every patient. But we must not allow the best to become the enemy of the good. And that's what's happening, I fear, with vaping.
How much success have you had as a general practitioner in getting your patients off cigarettes? And in advance of vaping, what did you recommend to people? Hypnosis or Nicorette gum or what sort of things? Or patches?
Yeah, there's various things. In fairness, like, doctors have been trying across Ireland for years, and the HSE has done some good work on this. And there has been success. I mean, the number of smokers is dropping in Ireland, has dropped significantly over the last 20 years. And you're right, things like patches, there's certain tablets you can get now, Nicorette inhalers, gum, so on, all these things. And they do work for some people. But there are other people who just consistently fail to get off the cigarettes. And what I've seen, and what I think a lot of doctors are seeing, is these people, when they switch to vaping, many of them will actually get off the vaping and stop smoking altogether. And we can't ignore that. That's a huge beneficial thing for society.
In addition to the 5,000 to 6,000 deaths a year caused by cigarette smoking, of all the patients you're seeing coming in, how many would you reckon, what proportion are coming in with illnesses that are related to cigarette consumption?
Well, obviously, it varies from practice to practice. But if you walk into if you look at the situation with COPD, for example, which is one of Ireland's most serious diseases.
What's COPD?
Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, emphysema, chronic bronchitis and so on. These illnesses are hugely associated with smoking. And Ireland has some of the worst incidences of those diseases in the world. And it is a major problem, not to mention the impact on heart disease and cancer and so on. So, to be quite honest about it, smoking is an enormous public health burden in Ireland. The situation has improved, but I think vaping has a critical role to play in reducing it in the future.
Do you see younger people turning away from cigarettes?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think the younger generation now, the people you see in their teens and 20s, aren't smoking as much as, say, the teenagers would have been 20 years ago. I think that's a widely recognised phenomenon. That's a very good thing. And to give credit where credit's due, that's a reflection on the work done by the HSE and by the public health authorities. But I think we've reached a point now where something extra may be needed, and vaping strikes me as a golden opportunity, a major public health opportunity.
Okay, one other thing I want to talk to you about before we finish. There was a big story broke last week after we last spoke to you about inducing, maybe is the right word, persuading nurses to take the flu vaccine by giving them chocolates or entering them in a draw for an iPad. What did you make of that? Yeah,
there was a huge amount of negative reaction to this. The big issue here, Matt, is why aren't nurses getting the flu jab? They should be getting the flu jab. I regard it as the duty of all healthcare professionals, myself included, to get the flu jab every year, because we can spread the disease to patients, and some of those patients may be very sick and may die as a result. So we have this ridiculous situation where nurses have not been getting it, and the HSE suggested maybe giving them chocolates because that's what's been done in other countries. And straight away, instead of anyone talking about why they aren't getting it, suddenly it became this politically correct liberal screaming fest in the media about, how dare nurses be patronised about chocolates. That's not the big issue here. Influenza is.
Well, a lot of the nurses were in contact with us, particularly last Friday, saying they have an exceptionally busy work schedule, that they don't have time to be going off-site to actually get the flu jab. It should be brought to them.
Fair point. Now that I accept, because back when I worked in hospitals 10, 11 years ago, there weren't vaccine clinics available. In fact, as I recall, the only hospital that offered me a vaccine was a private hospital I worked in, to my amazement. But I would say this, the HSE clearly has a role there. But if they're setting up vaccine clinics and the nurses aren't attending, well, then there's a problem. That seems to be what's being implied here. But certainly, yes, they should be operating clinics. But if they're available and the nurses don't go, well, that is an issue.
And when do you get your flu jab every year?
Around when it comes out, usually around September.
And you always do it?
Yeah. I would, yeah. Because
no fear of side effects?
No. Sore arm for a few hours, Matt. That's what I get.
Dr. Ruairi Hanley, as ever, thank you very much for joining us here on The Last Word this evening. Dr. Ruairi Hanley joins us to discuss medical matters every Wednesday on the programme.
The Last Word with Matt Cooper on Today FM.